Hi, I'm Emma Rhodes, coming to you from the campus of George Washington University in our nation's capital. We're here today to celebrate World Penguin Day with the Adjunct Sustainability Professor, Ron Naveen, the founder and president of the nonprofit science and educational organization, Oceanites. Via the long-term Antarctic Site Inventory Project, Oceanites has been counting penguins and monitoring Antarctic penguin population changes for almost 30 years and has gained a unique perspective witnessing climate change impacts firsthand on the southernmost part of our planet. Welcome, Ron.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for
Great.
having me.
Of course. My first question is, what is it about penguins and why do we celebrate World Penguin Day?
Well, penguins are just like us. They stand upright and they waddle along in a funny fashion like little old people. They're very enduring animals, and I do study them and have been studying them for 30 years. They just make my heart go flutter. Everybody loves penguins. I don't know who started World Penguin Day, but it's supposed to be an adjunct to Earth Week or Earth Day, which is April 22nd. But April 25th is a day to celebrate penguins around the world.
What's Oceanites' usual annual routine for counting penguins?
The usual routine is to get south to count penguin nests in usually November, December, and then come back and count the chicks in January or February. Our usual MO is to rely on tour ships to get to where we need to go. We've occasionally used government vessels like Royal Navy ships or yachts, but the whole point is to try to get down there and get the nest counts and chick counts and just keep adding to the database so that we can do retrospective analyses of how things have changed, and if changes are detected, to try to figure out why the changes have occurred.
Yeah, so what are you and your teams finding when you go and collect the data?
Well, the Antarctic Peninsula below South America, where we work, is one of the hot spots on the planet. On a year-round basis, over the last 60 years, it's warmed by 3 degrees centigrade or 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and in the winter by a whopping 5 degrees centigrade or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. And what we're finding in our database is that 2 of the 3 penguin species we constantly monitor, 2 of them, the Adeles and chinstrap penguin, numbers are dropping like flies. And the Gentoo penguins are in this warming climate doing quite well. So we have 2 losers and 1 winner. And that trend continues apace from year to year. It doesn't seem to be ending. But anyway, our focus is on the peninsula and trying to understand better why the Adeles and chinstraps in the northern part of the peninsula are not doing well.
Wow, so there's a lot going on.
A lot.
Yeah, so Oceanites uses clickers to count penguins. But this year, what are some new techniques that Oceanites is employing in its monitoring efforts?
Right, absolutely. I mean, basically, we get out and count with the handheld clickers, record our numbers in our notebooks, enter the numbers in the computer. Lately, we've been scheming to do a better job monitoring. And this past season, for the first time, we used aerial drones to take imagery of the various penguin colonies. And some of the imagery is thermal imagery, which means you measure the heat coming off of the penguins. It's going to enable us to do 2 things, to much more efficiently count the penguins using this imagery, and also to use various programs to map out the colonies so that from season to season, we can look at the amount of snow cover and see how the penguin colonies are changing. For example, in part of the Antarctic Peninsula this past season, the snow cover was incredibly intense. I mean, 3, 5, 6 feet high, not so much rain this year. So the penguins had a really bad year. Next year, who knows what it'll be like. But again, the whole point is to create a database of imagery that we can use to better analyze the changes that are occurring.
What are these changes that you're detecting telling us about climate in the Antarctic Peninsula?
Well, as mentioned, the temperature is rising and has been rising for the last 60 years. For somebody who's been going south for over 30 years, like I have, it's actually quite shocking. I can now walk on some gravel beaches that were covered by a glacier when I first started a few decades ago. You can see the retreat of some of the glaciers, and obviously you can see the changes in the penguin colonies where the numbers of penguin nests have reduced and basically shrunk over time. So it's a bit of a shock to just in one lifetime see the changes are happening, and it's probably going to continue for a while.
Wow. Oceanites is the only non-government organization that is collecting this type of data. How is this data that you're collecting influencing the Antarctic Treaty policy decisions?
We use the map database to write what we call State of Antarctic Penguins reports, the most recent one of which came out last year. And we table or submit these documents to the Antarctic Treaty meetings that occur annually and to the annual meetings of what's called CAMLAR, which is the Adjunct agreement that controls and regulates Antarctic fishing.
And going off of that, it's easy to think that all these changes happening in Antarctica are so far away, but what are these changes telling us about how we're going to have to deal with big climate changes coming our way?
It seems to us that the penguins rely, just like all biological creatures rely, on four vital factors. We need to have food to eat, we need to have a good home, we have to have a healthy environment, and we have to keep producing kids and grandkids or baby penguins and grandbaby penguins. So if one of those falls out of sync, that means trouble for the species involved. But I guess the real point is that what's happening to the penguins makes me and should make all of us think about what's going to happen to us humans when the big warming comes our way. Will our food supply still be secure? Will our homes, hopefully not on the coastline, survive and not get eaten up by rising sea level? What about environmental health? The COVID pandemic we all just lived through is a wake-up call that there's perhaps future pandemics in our future that we have to worry about. And then again, just the breeding population of humans, is our birth rate going up or down? So what's happening to the penguins suggests things we should be thinking about in our own regard moving forward.
Yeah, for sure. Who knew that penguins could be so eye-opening towards effects around us? So obviously there's also a lot of doom and gloom connected to climate change. Do you see rays of hope and optimism in this?
I actually do. It's hard not to feel the doom and gloom. We just had another intergovernmental panel climate change summary report saying that we only have so many years left to reduce carbon by so much. I think our future is both mitigation and adaptation. Do what we can to mitigate the amount of carbon going out into the atmosphere, and as best we can adapt. Let's not rebuild on the coastlines after our homes have been destroyed. The optimism I feel is that this is not going to happen overnight, perhaps not even during our lifetimes, but there are signs that things are getting better. Just simply thinking about the number of electric vehicles that are now on the road and will be increasing to be bought and driven in the United States alone, that's all good cause for cheer. The more solar farms and wind farms we have, despite all the difficulties and complaints about where these things are located, I think that's all a good sign. It's going to be expensive, it's going to be painful, but I see some helpful first steps moving forward. And we can also go out and become penguin counters or go into our neighborhood backyards and learn the animals and plants. There's a lot that all of us can do to keep cheery and cheerful and at the same time try to mitigate carbon emissions.
Very inspiring. So Ron is also an adjunct professor, as mentioned in the beginning, teaching a class called Climate Change and Policy. So could you tell us a bit about this course that you're teaching here at GW?
Absolutely. I mean, it's great to be associated with GW and hoping that that continues going into the future. My hope with this course is to talk in terms of Antarctica, its penguins, and the implications regarding climate change. Penguins are essentially avatars or indicator species of the health of the environment. And the same approach that I take and just mentioned, looking at the four vitals, can be used in other habitats and locations. So the goal in this class is to make sure that all the students get a chance to pick an avatar species of their own to examine, think about a conservation plan for assisting the conservation of that species, and most importantly, to get up and stand up in front of a crowd, our class or others, and talk about what needs to be done. I've had a lot of great luck using penguins, talking to people who for many years wouldn't believe in climate change, but just honestly telling them about the work that I do and why these penguins are doing well or not inspired them to think a little bit differently. Well, obviously, would love for folks to get involved. There are ways to donate to our cause. Just check out our website. But again, the overall goal here is to get people thinking positively about the Antarctic. Let's not be doomy and gloomy about it. Let's be positive and proactive. I think there's a lot of room for the world to grow and think differently about climate change. And the more and more people we have talking about it, from students to senior citizens, let's get out there and do it.
Well, happy World Penguin Day. Thank you so much for talking more about your research and efforts at GW.
Thanks, Emma. Really appreciate it. It's great talking to you. And go Penguins, onward and upward.
Go Penguins.